On March 8, 2014, a Boeing 777 took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 12:41 a.m., bound for Beijing. 239 passengers and crew aboard. Less than an hour into the flight, the plane vanished from radar. You know this story, or at least you think you do. But there's a second story, one hidden in the shadows of the first. A disappearance that came after the plane went missing. Because over time, the families who once stood on podiums, who cried on national television, who demanded truth, justice, and answers, they vanished too. Not in death, not in silence, but in a mystery of their own. This is the story of MH370's second vanishing, of the people who refused to forget and were slowly, systematically forgotten, and perhaps something more. March 8, 2014, MH370 disappears from radar screens, and the first to feel the vacuum are the families. At Kuala Lumpur Airport, Malaysian Airlines staff begin preparing for routine arrival, until someone notices that flight MH370 is no longer sending transponder signals, but rather than notify next of kin immediately, a different decision is made. Wait. Passengers' loved ones in Beijing are still waiting at the arrival gate. A 1:30 a.m. touchdown becomes 2:30, then 3 o'clock. Panic rises. The airline stalls. No announcements. At 6:30 a.m., 5 hours after the plane disappears, families are told that their loved one's flight is delayed. Tea will be another 2 hours before they are told the flight is missing. Inside the Lido Hotel in Beijing, chaos erupts. Malaysian Airlines sets up a family assistance center. There are no answers, only silence and apologetic shrugs. Across the globe, a theater of confusion begins. Malaysian authorities first claim the plane lost contact near Vietnam. Then they say it turned back across Malaysia. Then that it flew for hours over the Indian Ocean. Each change in story breaks the trust of the families. And with every lie, a pattern begins. On March 9th, just one day after the plane disappears, Chinese families begin protesting at the Malaysian embassy in Beijing. They chant, "Return our relatives." They demand records, radar data, answers. Inside the Lido Hotel, they scribble handwritten banners. One reads, "Malaysian Airlines, you owe us the truth." Soon, families begin forming alliances, legal teams, advocacy groups, support collectives. They plan coordinated press conferences. They beg international agencies for help. By March 10th, many families are no longer just mourning. They're organizing. Back in Malaysia, the government's response continues to sow mistrust. For 4 days, officials failed to mention that military radar had picked up the plane doubling back across the peninsula. A critical piece of information they chose not to release until later that week. One father, interviewed anonymously in April 2014, said, "Every day they changed the story. First it was the South China Sea, then the Andaman Sea, then the Indian Ocean. We weren't just grieving, we were being played. The United States, China, Australia, and Vietnam all begin massive search operations. But beneath the waves, the truth remains hidden. And above the surface, families feel abandoned. Between 2014 and 2016, the families were everywhere. Jiang Hui, the most visible Chinese relative, became the movement's symbol. His mother was on board. He quit his job and dedicated his life to the cause. He traveled across countries, met aviation experts, held vigils in multiple cities. He even learned how to interpret satellite ping data. But in 2018, after the official search ended, Jiang Hui vanished from public life. His once frequent blog was deleted. He stopped giving interviews. No farewell statement, no formal sign-off, just silence. And he wasn't alone. Many families, especially in China, were warned by officials to stop participating in international interviews. Some had their phones tapped. A few were told they were jeopardizing state relations. In 2015, a group of family members traveled to Malaysia to confront officials. One mother, whose son was on the flight, was physically pulled away by police from the hotel lobby and interrogated overnight. The advocacy group Voice 370, created to unify the families, saw dozens of members drop out by 2017. Then came the lawsuits. By late 2016, a number of families were offered financial settlements in exchange for signing non-disclosure agreements. Several families were quietly compensated under the Montreal Convention, the international agreement that regulates airline liability. But in nearly every case, the payment came with a catch. They could not sue the airline again. They could not discuss the terms publicly, and they could not participate in further legal action. In effect, the settlements became a legal muzzling mechanism. The public outcry dimmed, press coverage dried up, and slowly the families disappeared. Reports from 2017 and 2018 indicate that some Chinese families were placed under domestic surveillance. A leaked WeChat conversation showed a family group chat being deleted by authorities. Others say their travel rights were restricted, unable to get passports renewed or barred from flying abroad. One whistleblower in 2019 claimed that at least 3 different family advocacy WeChat groups were shut down by China's cyber division for disturbing public order. By 2020, only a handful of families still appeared in public forums. Grace Nathan was one. So was Li Eryu, a Chinese farmer who writes poems to his lost son every week. But even their voices grew softer. The longer MH370 stayed missing, the more theories emerged. But for the families, the confusion wasn't about speculation. It was about facts that never added up, and evidence that simply vanished. 1 week after the disappearance, a British company, Inmarsat, detected something odd. Although MH370 had stopped communicating, the satellite still registered hourly handshakes, signals that suggested the plane flew for another 6 hours after vanishing from radar. This changed everything. Theories shifted. The South China Sea was abandoned. The new focus became the southern Indian Ocean, in what became known as the Seventh Arc. But many families were skeptical. Why did Malaysia fail to inform the public about these signals sooner? And why were only partial logs released? In 2018, Victor Ianello, a member of the original investigation team, claimed that Malaysia withheld data about satellite signal timing and only released it after independent investigators pressured them. Then came the radar discrepancies. Malaysia claimed the plane turned west across the Malay Peninsula and flew over the Strait of Malacca, based on military radar. But multiple civilian ATC facilities in Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia had radar systems that should have picked this up too. Yet, no civilian radar logs were ever publicly released. The military had it, but didn't release it for 4 days. By then, any chance of real-time rescue was long gone. Families began to question, was something being covered up? Among the most controversial theories was one rarely allowed on mainstream media, that the plane was deliberately diverted to or shot down near Diego Garcia, a US military base in the Indian Ocean. While no evidence has confirmed this, one passenger's family claims they received a photo from a hidden iPhone pinged to that region. It was later dismissed as a hoax, but the families were left asking, why did US satellites and surveillance aircraft, among the most powerful on Earth, pick up nothing? In 2017, a former Malaysian air traffic control officer anonymously told reporters he was pressured to alter logbooks to reflect the official timeline. In 2019, a technician involved in satellite relay systems at Inmarsat told a journalist that pings can be manipulated if you know the system. He later retracted the statement. His name never released. Families trying to track down retired radar officers or engineers often hit walls. Emails bounced back, socials deleted, phone numbers went dead. More than a few relatives claimed they were followed after making independent inquiries. None of it was provable. But in the fog of unanswered questions, even silence becomes suspicious. Some families refused to give up. In 2016, Jiang Hui visited Inmarsat headquarters in London, trying to gain access to raw data. He was turned away. In 2017, Grace Nathan and Voice 370 launched a campaign to crowdfund a private search, raising over $200,000 to fund independent analysis. But without government access, radar logs, or data from Australian authorities, the search hit a dead end. One father spent over $100,000 of his savings hiring maritime tracking experts in France. He found nothing. By 2020, most families stopped, not because they found peace, but because they ran out of money and hope. When governments withhold, when investigators step back, and when even the families are denied a voice, what are we left with? A void, and the sense that someone wanted it that way. By 2023, MH370 was barely a headline. A few documentaries, a handful of news retrospectives. But for the families still searching, the silence was suffocating. Then, in March 2024, Malaysian officials announced they would reopen the search, partnering again with Ocean Infinity, a US-based deep-sea exploration firm. But the most chilling part? Many families weren't even informed. Grace Nathan said she found out through news articles, not from any government communication. Others learned through Twitter. One voice never stopped. Li Eryu, a Chinese farmer from Hebei province, lost his son in 2014. 10 years later, he still tends to his son's empty room, shoes still beside the bed, textbooks unopened. He writes poems, long handwritten letters, believing his son might someday read them. Quote, translation from AP News, 2024. Maybe he is alive somewhere. I believe he is. I still talk to him. I ask if he is cold. Li Eryu. When asked why he keeps the room untouched, he said, if he comes home, I want him to know that nothing changed, that I waited. The aftermath isn't just political, it's personal. Dozens of marriages ended. Some family members fell into poverty. Many died waiting. A few took their own lives, unable to live in the limbo of what if. Support networks collapsed. What remained was an unnatural quiet. Quote from Grace Nathan, 2024. It's not that we gave up. It's that we were shut out, slowly, deliberately. The story of MH370 has always been a mystery, but the vanishing of the families, that was no accident. It wasn't about fate. It was about pressure, about systems designed not to provide closure, but to exhaust those who demanded it. And one by one, it worked. They vanished from the cameras, from the interviews, from our memory. And maybe that's the real story, the one we never wanted to admit. When the plane disappeared, 239 lives were lost. But when the families disappeared, the truth may have gone with them. And maybe that's what someone always intended.